Welcome to you, whoever is watching this. Um, this is a multifaceted conversation that we're going to be engaging in. And I just want to start with our acknowledgement of country. I'm coming from Tharawal on the border of Tharawal lands and Eora Nation. And in the embrace of Earth's timeless wisdom, we honour the sacred custodians of lands that stretch across Australia's vast horizons, and to the seas and communities that pulse with life. We extend a hand of respect to those elders who have walked before us and those who walk with us today among the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. Our acknowledgement here weaves further to Indigenous communities globally, whose lands cradle the veins of our interconnected digital world. And we recognise the enduring echoes of the past and the ripples of the present that continue to shape the homes and hearts of these sacred peoples. So we're coming here in this conversation, in this dialogue, as a force to open a conversation and dialogue around Australia's draft national science and research priorities. This is a transdisciplinary collaboration that we're engaging in, and it's going to traverse lots of different topics. There's going to be lots that is within the bounds of this conversation and outside of the bounds of this conversation that we hope to explore over the coming weeks and months as well. So myself, Matthew Mika, coming from Tharawal country, I'm the co-founder and chief vision shaper of Tethix. And I'll let Adrian, Nathan, Sam, you introduce yourselves.
Alphabetical, Adrian.
Okay. So my name's Adrian Hines. I'm a research analyst at the Civilization Research Institute and the Consilience Project. I'm calling in from Gubbi Gubbi country, specifically Sunshine Coast in southeast Queensland. I am also doing my PhD research on the idea of intervening in the climate by putting sulfur in the stratosphere. And I'm not working on that anymore for hopefully obvious reasons. But I'm here to help input some perspectives and expertise from the climate and planetary boundaries body of knowledge and wisdom from academic research, broadly speaking.
Hi everyone, I'm Nate or Nathan, coming to you from Wurundjeri country. We're at the Collabs offices right now in Brunswick East. I'm a sociotechnology ethicist. I'm the ethicist in residence here at Collabs. I'm one of the co-founders and responsible firekeepers at Tethix. And I've spent the last 12 or 13 years advising governments, major corporations, research and policy institutes, and startups all around the world in our attempt to build sociotechnical infrastructures that better enable us as global peoples, as humanity, as a civilization, to healthfully coexist with the technologies that we create and the rest of the biosphere. I think that'll be highly relevant to our discussion today.
Yeah, thanks for that intro. I'm Sam, one of the co-founders of Collabs. So Collabs is a transdisciplinary innovation hub and co-working lab space. So we're looking at catalyzing the transition to a more circular, bio-based and regenerative economy using bio-based and bio-inspired design and innovation, and looking at the world through a complexity-informed living systems approach with a bit of a sprinkle of ecological design in there as well. So as you can see, we all kind of have really interesting overlapping things that have come together here, hence the transdisciplinary sort of collaboration approach for this piece.
Wonderful intros. Thank you, Adrian, Sam, Nate. So I'm just going to cover off some of these points, and Adrian, some of these things for us to consider and recognize as we start this conversation.
Yeah, so in our work with Civilization Research Institute and looking at essentially existential and global catastrophic risk, a lot of the frameworks and foundations for that is understanding that we live in deep time. And this quote from an elder who was also at the University of Technology, Sydney, an elder in the sort of wisdom sense here: all things will outlast us. The land will change and survive. Land will be different, but new things will come of it. And the synthesis position that I am working from here, and that we do at CRI and Consilience Project, is recognize that this understanding also comes through systems knowledge and areas such as cybernetics and earth system science. And so the rather famous Buckminster Fuller wrote a book, Operating Manual for Spaceship Earth. And besides that one book and a couple papers out there, we actually don't have an operating manual. And we are on Spaceship Earth. And Australia is also on Earth. So we have a responsibility as citizens, as people in an ecology, to understand how we are situated in that. And to the degree to which each of us has a little finger on part of the steering wheel, we got to start moving together in the same direction that ultimately results in more habitable biosphere and bioregions and states and territories for everyone.
Thanks, Adrian. Wonderful context there and recognition of the deep time that needs to be brought forth into the conversations, particularly in the context that we're dealing with here with the National Science and Research Priorities. So importantly, like the current state and trajectory that we're on needs to recognize that we have a desire for a paradigm shift underway. This can be set and also acknowledged with the voice and the Australian referendum that is being put forth to the Australian peoples over the coming weeks. And recognizing that the intention as expressed in the draft consultation document for Australia's National Science and Research Priorities talks about embedding First Nations knowledge and knowledge systems. And that's core to what we're going to be expressing in the conversation over the next 10, 15, 20 minutes, but further in dialogue that'll come over the coming weeks and months. And one thing that is important here is that the current state that we're in from a bio, social, cultural, political, economic perspective is extremely complex and interconnected. Adrian, I'll hand over to you to talk about some of the current state that we're in as an Australian society and the trajectory that we're on.
We live in a techno-scientific Western democracy, fundamentally. Australia, along with a lot of other Western countries, we have a lot of collaborations across research, innovation, and implementation of technologies, from CSIRO to our various national universities and state universities. This is great. Australia is actually at the world leading forefront of a lot of research and technological innovations across quantum science and quantum computation to even biodiversity conservation. We're definitely up there. But at the same time, Australia is one of the worst countries in the world, according to a whole bunch of metrics across emissions, like greenhouse gas emissions, to how we have exceeded planetary boundaries to be in an existential ecological overshoot situation. And this is all descriptive. This is in academic papers, this is in NGO reports, this is well known. However, what we're not recognizing here in our current governance situation, our current political zeitgeist, is a lot of this arises from the way governance itself and the lack of collaboration with First Nations, with the younger people of Australia, people who are in high schools, in universities, who are going to be feeling these impacts. And I think, I want to pass over to Nate here because you have a lot of experience in what the ins and outs are of a lot of corporations and government bodies and this kind of thing, which is where the rubber hits the road as far as action, inaction, and maladaptive potential.
Yeah, so thanks, mate. I'll just briefly describe that when we think about the interconnected, interdependent, and sort of overlapping crises that are sometimes collectively referred to as the meta or poly crisis, at a sort of deeper level, many scholars, commentators, analysts, etc., that work in that space describe this as a relational crisis. And I think the relational crisis fundamentally is about our relation to all of life and what one might think of as the sacredness of life. Now, the paradigm that like the shared mental model, if you will, that gave rise to our current sociotechnical operating structure within which corporations exist, modern governments exist, etc., is such that it's almost impossible not to externalize. And the way that we operate, or the value system from which we operate, puts on a pedestal a certain set of values and operates outside the purview of many other values, such as relationality, such as biodiversity, whatever it may be. And so I think it's important to recognize that we're all in this thing together. It's also important to recognize that at every level of our complex global system, our complex global civilization, from the inner individual, if you want to think about it that way, all the way to something like the UN Security Council. For those paying attention to what's going on, it's very easy to feel existentially hopeless. And I think one can deeply both sympathize and empathize with that perspective. But even mathematically speaking, all hope is not lost. The useful model that I think we need to collectively embody at every level of the complex global system that we're referring to here, from the deep inner self through to globally coordinated efforts, is one of existential hopefulness. And if we can truly embody an existential hopefulness, which means recognizing where we've come from, which means leaning into where we are today and radically accepting that, going into the process, which is going to be difficult, which is going to be harmful in all manner of ways. The best of humanity, and humanity at its best, is nothing short of magnificent. Absolutely magnificent. It is beautiful. The best of humanity can help us come through this. And I think we can shift the trajectory. And that is what the four of us and so many others that we are, I think, deeply grateful and fortunate to collaborate with on a daily basis. That is what we are trying to seed in this moment.
Thank you, Nathan. Existential hope amongst a sea of disenfranchisement and existential hopelessness that many people feel on a daily basis as well. So moving on to this imperative that we have, like catalyzing this conversation, embracing the ambiguity, the complexity, is actually situated amongst what Nathan was referring to, like the meta crisis. But here in Australia, there's much more immediate considerations to bring up here. And this is well captured in the Climate Council's uninsurable nation report. We had some of the worst bushfires back in the 2019 and 2020 period, and myself being down the south coast of New South Wales was feeling that. Many people felt that. Many of our living systems felt that, and billions of life forms were destroyed during that. Now, what we also have here is a broader discussion of these real, very real situations with our climate, the impact that our activities have on the living systems around us. And Adrian, I'll provide this to you to talk about what we see here in some of what's come out of the Climate Council and this climate risk, like that had real impact on real people, that might be listening to this.
Yeah, no, this is exactly right. So, and this map really speaks for itself, and we should note here, this is looking out to 2100 and only a medium case scenario, medium emission scenario. We're actually in closer to the worst case scenario right now, as far as emission trajectories go. And some of the projects, some of the resource extraction that Australia is involved in, necessarily so in order to, so far until now, continue our current comfortable civilization and standard of living, for which we ought to be grateful for. It has also unfortunately led to this current extraordinarily urgent situation where this summer, the next few months, is probably going to be extraordinary as far as fire risk, flood risk, and storm risk, storm surges on coastlines, which is where most Australians live, where statistically speaking, anyone listening to this and anyone reading our proposal probably lives. We're not immune to this. So the dialogue in broader mainstream global climate discussions has thus far been, it's the most vulnerable, the third world countries and most vulnerable communities in countries that are most at risk. And that is true. But it's also true that this medium to high and high risk concerns, issues, actual situation we're in is the case for those of us who are better off. I'm sitting here in a wonderful spot in Noosa and Sunshine Coast, and I'm genuinely concerned, based on my own prior expertise, knowledge, and research in climate, that summer is going to be extremely dangerous for us here on the Sunshine Coast. And that's also the case for Melbourne, for Brisbane, for Sydney. And we've already seen this happen. 2019, 2020 was a warning shot, and we're not listening. And so, and to expand a little further, this is just climate, but it's based into a larger situation of what we call the meta crisis, but it's also been termed the poly crisis. And when we look at individual risks, we can situate them in a certain kind of typology, but we zoom out to the broader set of how governance functions, and it really we can say that it's CO2 parts per million in the atmosphere, but it's much more than that. It's what we're doing to the oceans. It's all the plastic and the packaging materials that we're using. It's the resources that we're extracting from the earth to feed our standard of living, and the waste products that are then going into the soils, the waterways, all of that. And so I'm tempted, actually, I want to hand this over to Sam here, because although this is generally my area, Sam and I have spoken at length about what this means for us in living in Australia, and for Sam living in Melbourne, because I think it's easy to get lost in sort of the abstract mental model landscape, but I think the lived experience and the familiarity that you have, Sam, it really speaks to this.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I mean, so collabs as a concept was quite literally an emergent strategy and a response to these bushfires and all of the things that were going on around us at the time, and kind of coming to the realization that the current ways in which we were addressing problems and the ways in which we were thinking were a big part of that problem, and that we needed to address these things from a more systemic approach, which is kind of like what you were speaking to just before, Adrian. And I feel that there's so much potential if we do sort of look at taking a more living systems based and ecological design thinking approach, where we look at basing our research and innovation and looking towards the jobs of the future and thinking, how can we ensure that these are inherently regenerative and additive to the system as a whole? And that to do that, we need to be, we need to radically redesign, reshape, retool, and rethink our entire lineal materials economy. And we need to be phase shifting, not just the way we do things, but the way we think about things. And so that a big part of that is transformative innovation and finding new ways of doing things that are no longer just perpetuating the current ways of doing things, because we have to be doing net positive. It's no longer can we just sustain what we're doing, because sustaining the unsustainable is unsustainable in the long term. So yeah, I guess it does feel like there's a sense of urgency, but it's only through collective, collaborative sense making and decision making and rapid innovation that addresses this from that wide boundary systems thinking perspective. Do I think that we can kind of get through this eye of the needle that we're kind of facing at the moment?
Can I just add one thing before we go on to our proposal really quickly? So Tyson Yunkaporta speaks of the unique responsibility that is bestowed upon humanity as the only custodial like species on this planet. Now, without getting too much into the nuance of the ecology here, we do seem to be the only species that is capable of shaping the world to such an extent so quickly. Therefore, there is a radical responsibility and accountability bestowed upon us to...
And a moral imperative as well.
It is absolutely a moral imperative to reorient and lean into that existential hopefulness and find a deeply connected, collaborative and coordinated pathway forward.
And just to quickly synthesize everything that Nate and Sam have spoken to here, and in the context that we're in, I'm just going to read out this quote that was literally from a few days ago from the co-coordinator general at the National Emergency Management Agency. They've been having discussions in Canberra over the last week about this. Yes, we're going to experience a warmer, drier spring and summer, but we should also prepare for the possibility of cyclones, floods, bushfires, and heat waves. And he's talking about now, he's talking about the next few months. And so what this urgency and the imperative that we have is, on the one hand, to hold the grand possibility, the existential hope that radical, collaborative, regenerative innovation and transformation of how we go about economic activities and instantiating amazing technological ideas into the world that regenerate our biosphere and to make life better for the most vulnerable and ultimately for all of us. And I think this really speaks to the question that we're answering in our proposal that is implicit in what is not currently spoken to in the National Science and Research Priorities as currently drafted.
So our proposal to build on this necessity, this moral imperative that we have to bring about new ways of learning, doing, being, working together as a nation, as peoples, we propose collective futurecrafting as a way to cultivate Australia's transition to the Symbiocene, this era of being able to live together in more symbiotic and harmonious ways with all the other living systems that we live within and live with, and that we actually rely upon for us to survive and thrive. So collective futurecrafting as a proposal is this transdisciplinary integrative approach that's about us coming together as a nation, as peoples from lots of different fields, from lots of different lived experiences, to collectively envision the most preferable futures. It's combining elements of participatory governance, collective intelligence, systems thinking, transdisciplinary action research, and various forms of expertise that is ranging from the scientific to Indigenous wisdom. And this is all relevant to the consultation that we're responding to with this proposal with Australia's draft National Science and Research Priorities. So Collective Futurecrafting is really about bringing this to life. And I'll provide the prompt here to talk about that. This isn't just about us as humans. This is not a human-centric view that we're trying to push forward here. And Sam, I think you've got some extraordinary context to bring to this need to factor in all living systems in Australia.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you pretty much summed it up. I mean, I'm happy to jump in and riff on this, but yeah, it's like, if we take that approach of like inherently interconnected and interwoven, which is fundamentally at the forefront of science, which is funny because it ties back to that traditional Indigenous wisdom and knowledge of that interdependence. And we are now seeing this, we are feeling this, and we can tell that this is something that we need to be addressing. So I think what's so important about framing this in a living systems thinking, lens, is that the linear reductionist and mechanistic way of command and control with top-down management and hierarchical sort of ways of looking at things, that worked up to a point. And as with the structure of scientific revolutions, you get to a point where the theories no longer work in practice due to the context of the times. And we can all see this happening around us. There's multiple systems failures in multiple places based on this old way of looking at things, which it's not that it's wrong. I just want to clarify there that it's really bloody good. It's really effective and useful, but that map is not the whole territory. And that's why we're speaking to this ecological design and living systems thinking approach. Like, what happens if we designed our economies and our ways of living based off biology? What if business was based on biology? What if economics was based on ecology? What if we took these naturalistic language and metaphors and used that as a way to describe the futures that we want to be moving towards? And that kind of, to me, is something that feels like it really resonates when we speak about this regenerative capacities, is that it makes way more sense to be speaking about this in the terms of living things rather than like a machine or a computer or something of the likes.
I'll just add really quickly as we transition to patterns. I think we share in the bold claim that the Commonwealth or the federal government has a deep duty of care to the future. Much like the tour that Sophie Howe was on recently from the Welsh government, and we certainly feel a duty of care and a deep responsibility and accountability to our children, like our literal biological children, but in a more sort of metaphorical or wider sense.
All of
right?
our relations,
absolutely,
right?
all relations,
well.
in a genuinely holistic sense, and I think that's critical. So and holding these sort of like ways of knowing, being, thinking, feeling, seeing, doing, intention. As Sam said, it's not that what we've done is wrong per se. Water sanitation, certain types of medicines, like there's so much that we have achieved as a species.
It's just growing up as a species.
Absolutely.
Transitioning from adolescence to adulthood and acknowledging and assuming that mantle of responsibility as the custodial species.
Absolutely. And that is largely about how do we, collectively embody wisdom.
And shifting from the I to the we to the all.
Yep.
So it's that what we deem as self, and acknowledging that what are we without our environment and our relations.
Yeah, absolutely.
Wary of time though, so we might want to swing through.
Get into patterning quickly,
And this is embodied in a mantra that I've got that I repeat every day. I am one, I am me, I am all. I am the spirit that flows through all things. Acknowledging our relational experience as a species, to each other, to all these things around us that we live within and live with, is crucial. And transitioning to patterns, I guess what is articulated in the government's draft national science and research priorities kind of gets at the what, with the priorities, the aims, the objectives, the critical research areas, why this is needed, and we've provided some additional context to that, in the urgency and this imperative that we need for change. But like, how do we actually go about doing this? What are the patterns that we need to break and disrupt to be able to cultivate Australia's transition to the Symbiocene? And that's what Collective Futurecrafting is proposing. And we'll use an example here with some conceptual patterns. And we've taken an example here that's about importantly acknowledging here as well that we want to bring forth, and at least in what's expressed in this consultation document, this intention to embed First Nations knowledge and knowledge systems. We don't have education around this. People don't understand First Nations knowledge. Myself included. I was brought up on a very colonial view of Australian history, being in my mid-40s. So this is an important thing. How does this look when we're embedding it in our approach to collective futurecrafting? So first knowledge application as a work stream is extremely important. How do we actually integrate this into what we're doing and apply it at a local level? So what we see here is some examples, moving from triangles to circles, from hierarchies to these dialogic circles that involve diverse perspectives. And Adrian, I'll kind of hand over to you to kind of talk more about this at the moment, and what we see here as these bunch of circles and labels on the screen.
Yeah. Importantly, I think our preceding discussion up till now has been really the why, the imperative, the urgency, and also part of the substance of our proposal. But it might sound esoteric and abstract to some, but really this is quite concrete. What you're seeing here is descriptive of how human beings can collaborate and work together in a built environment, in offices or around a fireplace or anything in between. And so what we're looking at is just a general instantiated mental model of how we could collaborate with a diverse array of different stakeholders, from government, academia, to business, to First Nations, to make it really, really, really clear here, something like cultural burning, or regenerating the soils in a farm or mangrove ecosystem. And those projects, those workflow, work stream items, are those red dots you see. And the people that are involved are those circles that are coming around in concentricity. Concentric collaboration is the way I personally think about this. And it might seem a little bit odd and unusual, but all we're doing here is noting that the way that the Western cultural techno-scientific mind has thus far conceptualized the way we modify the world, the way we innovate, has been through boxes. Literally, in org charts, to how one might do a project proposal, or how one writes a linear piece of text, a paper, a report, an internal memo. And so all our proposal really asks for and suggests is, let's think of it in a circular, regenerative, concentric way.
Very helpful context there, Adrian, to reinforce this, and we'll transition now just to kind of talking about this as a larger pattern to catalyze the conversation for collective future crafting. And again, this is what we've presented here in this video, in this discussion, is just part of an ongoing conversation that we're hoping to be able to open up, that we will be embracing together and with our networks. But importantly, that there's ways to actually connect all of these different parts. Now, what organizational structures that exist today that can be adapted for this is, again, something that we'll explore over the coming weeks and in supporting documents as part of the consultation submission. But importantly here, we need to connect to lots of different parts of our ecosystems, parts of human collaboration that already exist, so that we can bring about these new ways of being, learning, doing, and co-creating. So that's factoring in everything from policymakers, research institutions, international organizations, universities, existing corporations that need to align to the national science and research priorities, high schools and colleges. Like where are the future generations that are going to inherit a lot of this, involved in these discussions, involved in co-creating, involved in embracing the challenges that we face today and into the future.
And if I can jump in here just really quickly, anyone listening to this right now or who reads our 2-page, very brief summary is already part of the conversation, is already part of collective futurecrafting. All we've done is describe something that is emerging and can really come into being, because ultimately we're all on the same land, we're all on the same planet.
Earthians together.
Yeah, that feels like a pretty strong point to wrap on. Thank you to whoever has tuned in, and we're grateful for the opportunity to be a part of the collective future crafting. There is very little that matters more